A shadowy figure slips through the mist-shrouded streets of St. Mary Mead, clutching a glittering crimson brooch stained with secrets that could unravel an entire village. Welcome to Miss Marple's Puzzle of the Crimson Brooch, a tale of intrigue and deduction that will keep you guessing until the very end. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and settle in to enjoy the story. If you're hooked, hit that subscribe button. Your support means a lot to us. Chapter 1. The arrival of the mysterious heirloom in the quaint English village of St. Mary Mead, where gossip flows as freely as the afternoon tea. Life for the elderly, Miss Jane Marple, was about to take an unexpected turn. It all began on a crisp autumn morning when the postman delivered a peculiar package to her doorstep at Gossington Cottage. Miss Marple, with her sharp eyes hidden behind spectacles and her knitting needles ever at the ready, wasn't one to receive many surprises. But this one felt different right from the start. The package was wrapped in faded brown paper, tied with twine that looked as old as the hills, and bore no return address. Only her name scrawled in elegant looping handwriting that hinted at a bygone era. As she carefully unwrapped it in her cosy sitting room, surrounded by shelves of well-thumbed mystery novels and a ticking grandfather clock, out tumbled a stunning crimson brooch, its ruby-red stones catching the light like drops of blood frozen in time. Pinned to it was a cryptic note. "Dear Aunt Jane, guard this with your life. It holds the key to a fortune lost and a murder unspoken. Yours in haste, E." Who was E? And why send such a valuable item to her of all people? Miss Marple's mind, honed by years of observing human nature from her garden window, immediately buzzed with questions. She recalled her distant niece, Eliza, who had vanished years ago amid whispers of scandal. But this didn't match Eliza's bold, modern script. No, this felt like something pulled from the pages of one of her favourite detective tales, yet far too real to dismiss. As Miss Marple examined the brooch more closely under her magnifying glass, she noticed intricate engravings on the back, tiny symbols that resembled a family crest, perhaps from the aristocratic Harrington line, known for their tragic history of untimely deaths and disputed inheritances. The village had its share of old families, but the Harringtons stood out. Their manor on the outskirts had been shuttered since the war, rumoured to be cursed after the patriarch. Sir Reginald Harrington was found poisoned in his study, his death ruled a suicide despite suspicions otherwise. Could this brooch be connected? Miss Marple set it down gently on her lace doily-covered table and poured herself a cup of Earl Grey, her thoughts drifting to the villagers who might know more. There was Colonel Bantry, her old friend from the local golf club, always full of war stories, but tight-lipped on family matters. His wife, Dolly, a chatterbox who thrived on Tea Party rumours, and young Inspector Craddock from Scotland Yard, who often sought her unofficial advice on cases that baffled the professionals. She decided to start with a casual visit to the Bantrys that afternoon, brooch safely tucked in her handbag. But as she stepped out, a chill wind carried the sound of hurried footsteps retreating down the lane. Someone had been watching her cottage. Was it paranoia, or the first clue in a puzzle that promised danger? Venturing down the winding path lined with hedgerows bursting in autumn colours, Miss Marple arrived at the Bantrys' sprawling home, where Dolly greeted her with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Jane, darling, what a surprise! Come in, come in. The scones are fresh from the oven." Over tea in the sunlit drawing room, Miss Marple subtly steered the conversation toward old village scandals. "Do you remember the Harrington affair, Dolly? Such a pity about Sir Reginald." Dolly's eyes widened as she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh yes, poisoned by his own hand, they said, but I never believed it. His wife, Lady Harrington, fled to London afterward, and their son, Edmund, wait, wasn't his name starting with E? Disappeared entirely. Rumours of a hidden will, jewels smuggled from India during the Raj. Why do you ask?" Miss Marple feigned nonchalance, pulling out the brooch. "This arrived today, with a note from someone signing as E. It seems familiar. Dolly gasped, nearly spilling her tea. That's the crimson brooch. Legend has it Sir Reginald gave it to his mistress before his death, said to be worth a king's ransom, cursed to bring misfortune to its owners. Jane, you must be careful. People have died for less. The conversation deepened as Dolly recounted tales she'd overheard at bridge games. How the brooch was allegedly stolen from an Indian temple, bringing bad luck to the Harringtons ever since. Sir Reginald had supposedly hidden clues to a vast fortune within its design, but decoding them required knowledge of ancient symbols, something Miss Marple noted for later research in her modest library. Practical tips for anyone facing a similar mystery, she mused aloud to Dolly, include documenting every detail, sketch the item, note the postmark, which in this case was smudged, from London perhaps, and observe reactions when showing it around. People's faces reveal more than words, Miss Marple advised with a knowing smile. As the afternoon waned, Colonel Bantry joined them, gruffly dismissing the stories as poppycock, but his furrowed brow suggested otherwise. He mentioned a recent stranger in the village, a tall man in a dark coat, asking questions about old estates at the local pub. Could he be connected? Miss Marple thanked them and headed home, her mind piecing together fragments like a jigsaw puzzle. Back at her cottage, as twilight fell and she lit the fire, Miss Marple pondered the brooch's weight in her hand. It felt heavier than mere jewels, laden with history. She recalled a similar case from her youth, where a seemingly innocent heirloom led to revelations of forgery and betrayal in a neighbouring town. For viewers following along, here's a tip. When unravelling mysteries, start with the obvious connections. Family trees, public records, and work inward to the hidden motives. Greed, jealousy, love gone sour. Human nature never changes. As she knitted by the hearth, a knock at the door startled her. It was Inspector Craddock, looking unusually grave. Miss Marple, we've had reports of a break-in attempt nearby, and word is you're in possession of something valuable. She invited him in, sensing the puzzle was expanding. Little did she know, this was just the beginning. The crimson brooch held secrets that would draw in suspects from the past and present, testing her wits like never before. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, where shadows from the Harrington Manor begin to creep into the light. Chapter 2. Shadows from the Manor. The fire in Miss Marple's cottage crackled softly as Inspector Craddock settled into the armchair, his face etched with concern under the dim glow of the lamp. The crimson brooch rested on the table between them, its ruby facets glinting like eyes watching their every word. Craddock, young but seasoned, had a knack for sensing trouble, and tonight his instincts were on edge. He leaned forward, his voice low. Miss Marple, that break-in attempt I mentioned, it was at the old Harrington Manor. Nothing was taken, but the caretaker swears he saw a man in a dark coat rifling through the library before he fled. And now this brooch shows up at your door? It's no coincidence. Miss Marple's fingers paused on her knitting, her mind racing. The Harrington Manor, long abandoned, was a labyrinth of dusty rooms and forgotten secrets. She nodded thoughtfully, inviting Craddock to share more. He described the scene: shattered glass in a side window, books strewn across the floor, and a single footprint in the mud outside, too large for the elderly caretaker. We're dusting for prints, he added, but I'd wager whoever it was knows about that brooch. The next morning, Miss Marple decided to visit the manor herself, driven by a quiet determination to uncover what linked the brooch to the break-in. Bundled in her tweed coat, she walked the mile to the estate, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. The manor loomed ahead, its ivy-clad walls and boarded windows giving it the air of a sleeping giant. The caretaker, Mr. Gibbs, a wiry man with a permanent scowl, met her at the rusted gate. "Not safe to poke around here, miss," he grumbled, but her gentle insistence softened his resolve. He led her inside, where the air smelled of mildew and old wood. The library, where the intruder had been spotted, was a cavernous room with shelves towering to the ceiling. Many books untouched since Sir Reginald's death decades ago. Miss Marple's sharp eyes scanned the chaos. Books on heraldry and Indian artifacts were pulled from their places, as if someone had been searching for something specific. She noticed a faded ledger on a side table, its pages yellowed but intact. Flipping it open, she found records of the Harrington estate's dealings in the 1920s, including a curious entry. Crimson Brooch, acquired Calcutta 1923, value undisclosed, secured in vault. A vault? No one had mentioned a vault in the manor. As Gibbs rambled about the manor's upkeep, Miss Marple wandered to a portrait above the fireplace, a stern-faced Sir Reginald, his hand resting on a cane topped with the same crest she'd seen on the brooch. The painting seemed to watch her, its eyes unsettlingly lifelike. She asked Gibbs if he'd ever heard of a hidden vault. He scratched his chin, hesitant. "Old tales, miss. They say Sir Reginald built a strong room somewhere in the house, but no one's found it. Mind you, folks thought he was mad toward the end, always muttering about curses and treasures." Her interest piqued. Miss Marple pressed further, learning that Sir Reginald's son, Edmund, had been seen in the village just before his disappearance, arguing with a woman in a veiled hat near the church. Could that have been his mother, Lady Harrington, or perhaps the mysterious mistress tied to the brooch's legend? Gibbs shrugged, uninterested, but Miss Marple stored the detail away. Leaving the manor, she took a detour through the village churchyard, where the Harrington family plot lay under a yew tree's shadow. The gravestones were weathered, but Sir Reginald stood out, its inscription chipped but legible. "Gone to his rest, 1925. Beside it was an empty plot, reserved for Lady Harrington, who'd never returned after fleeing to London. As Miss Marple lingered, she noticed fresh flowers, white lilies, placed at the base of the stone. Odd for a man dead 50 years. She bent to inspect them, her fingers brushing against a small card tucked beneath. "Forgive me, R." No signature, just those words in a shaky hand. Her pulse quickened. Someone was still mourning, or atoning for Sir Reginald's death. Was it the same person who'd sent her the brooch, or the intruder at the manor? Back in the village, Miss Marple stopped at the post office, hoping to trace the package's origin. The postmistress, Mrs. Cleary, was a font of local knowledge, her eyes gleaming with curiosity as Miss Marple inquired about the smudged London postmark. "Can't say for sure, Miss Marple, but we've had a few odd letters lately, addressed to folks long gone. One came for Edmund Harrington himself, if you can believe it, returned unopened." "London postmark, same as yours," Miss Marple's mind whirred. Edmund, or someone using his name, was circling back into the village's orbit. She thanked Mrs. Cleary and headed home, the brooch heavy in her handbag. As she passed the village green, she caught sight of a tall man in a dark coat, his face obscured by a hat, watching her from across the street. He turned abruptly and vanished into an alley before she could call out. That evening, as rain pattered against her cottage windows, Miss Marple sat with a fresh pot of tea, the brooch before her. She sketched the crest's symbols in her notebook, wondering if they held the key to the manor's hidden vault. The intruder, the flowers, the letter to Edmund. It was a puzzle with too many pieces missing. But she knew one thing. The answers lay in the past, buried in the Harringtons' tangled history. Tomorrow, she'd visit the local historian, Miss Hartnell, who'd spent years compiling village records. If anyone knew about Edmund or the brooch's origins, it would be her. As the clock struck 9, a distant creak outside her garden gate made her pause. The village of St. Mary Mead was stirring with secrets, and Miss Marple was determined to unravel them before they unravelled her. The story continues in Chapter 3, where the past begins to whisper its truths. Chapter 3. Whispers from the Archives. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Miss Marple's cottage, casting delicate patterns on the rug as she prepared for her visit to Miss Hartnell, the village historian. With the crimson brooch tucked safely in a velvet pouch inside her handbag, Miss Marple set out, her sensible shoes tapping along the cobblestone path to the small stone house where Miss Hartnell lived, surrounded by roses and stacks of dusty ledgers. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke, and the village seemed deceptively peaceful, as if no secrets lurked behind its quaint facades. Miss Hartnell, a wiry woman with a penchant for tweed skirts and an encyclopedic memory for St. Mary Mead's history, greeted her with a brisk nod. "Jane Marple, what brings you to my archives? Not another of your little puzzles, I hope." Her tone was teasing, but her eyes sharpened with interest as Miss Marple produced the brooch, its ruby glow catching the light on the cluttered parlour table. Miss Hartnell adjusted her spectacles, peering at the brooch with a reverence usually reserved for ancient manuscripts. She recognized the crest at once, a lion rampant crossed with a lotus flower, unique to the Harrington family. "This is no trinket, Jane. It's tied to the Harringtons' time in India, when Sir Reginald served as a colonial officer. He brought back all manner of treasures, not all of them honestly acquired, if you catch my drift." She bustled to a shelf, pulling down a leather-bound volume labelled St. Mary Mead Families, 1900–1930. As she flipped through brittle pages, Miss Marple leaned in, noting entries about Sir Reginald's return in 1923 with a fortune in jewels, including a brooch rumoured to be a gift for a mysterious woman. "Not Lady Harrington," Miss Hartnell clarified, her voice dropping. "The village gossiped about a dancer from Calcutta, a beauty who vanished after Sir Reginald's death. Some said she was the reason he was poisoned, not by his own hand, mind you, but by someone jealous or betrayed." Miss Marple's thoughts flickered to the note signed E and the lilies at the grave. Could the dancer be connected? The historian's parlour was a treasure trove of clues. Miss Hartnell unearthed a yellowed photograph from a tin box, showing a young man with sharp features, Edmund Harrington, Sir Reginald's son, standing beside a woman in a veiled hat, her face obscured but her posture elegant, almost defiant. The photo was dated 1924, a year before Sir Reginald's death. "Edmund was a troubled sort," Miss Hartnell said, tapping the image. "Ran off to London after his father's funeral. Cut ties with the family, but I heard whispers he was back in the area before he vanished for good. Meeting someone in secret at the old mill." Miss Marple's mind latched onto the detail. The old mill, now a crumbling ruin by the river, was a place villagers avoided, claiming it was haunted. She made a mental note to visit it later, sensing it might hold answers about Edmund's fate. As they sipped tea, Miss Hartnell shared another tidbit. The Harrington Manor's vault wasn't a myth. Village records hinted at a hidden room behind the library fireplace, accessible only by a mechanism tied to the family crest. Sir Reginald was paranoid, she said. He trusted no one, not even his wife. If that brooch is a key, it's to something he wanted protected, or hidden. Miss Marple examined the brooch again, tracing the lotus and lion engravings. Could they align with a lock? She thanked Miss Hartnell, promising to return if more questions arose, and stepped back into the village, her thoughts swirling. The photograph of Edmund and the veiled woman gnawed at her. Was the woman the dancer, or someone closer to home? And why had Edmund's name resurfaced in a letter at the post office? On her way back, Miss Marple passed the village hall, where a small crowd gathered for a jumble sale. Among them was Mrs. Price, the vicar's wife, whose knack for overhearing secrets rivaled Miss Marple's own. Pausing to browse a table of second-hand books, Miss Marple casually mentioned the lilies she'd seen at Sir Reginald's grave. Mrs. Price's face tightened. "Lilies? I saw a woman placing them there 2 days ago, tall, older, dressed in city clothes. She didn't look local, and she left in a hurry when I approached." Miss Marple's heart quickened. An outsider, mourning Sir Reginald after all these years, suggested a deeper connection. Perhaps the veiled woman from the photograph, or someone tied to the brooch's sender. As she neared her cottage, Miss Marple noticed a scrap of paper caught in the hedgerow near her gate. It was torn, with a few words scrawled in pencil. Mill, Midnight E. The handwriting matched the note pinned to the brooch. Her pulse raced. The old mill at midnight? It was a risk. But Miss Marple had never shied away from the truth, no matter how shadowy the path. She resolved to go, but not alone. She'd ask Inspector Craddock to accompany her, citing a hunch to avoid alarming him with the note's details. As she entered her cottage, the brooch seemed to pulse in her handbag, a silent reminder of the danger circling closer. The village was no longer just a backdrop. It was a chessboard, and someone was moving pieces in the dark. The story continues in Chapter 4, where the mill's shadows reveal a startling encounter. Chapter 4. The Midnight Encounter. The moon hung low over St. Mary Mead, casting a silvery glow across the village as Miss Marple prepared for her clandestine visit to the old mill. The cryptic note, Mill, Midnight, E, burned in her mind, its pencil-scrawled words a beacon pulling her toward answers. She sat by her cottage window, the crimson brooch resting on the table beside a flickering oil lamp, its ruby facets reflecting secrets yet to be unveiled. The clock on the mantel ticked toward 11, each chime a reminder of the risk she was about to take. Miss Marple, ever prudent, had telephoned Inspector Craddock earlier that evening, her voice calm but firm. "I've a feeling about the old mill, Inspector," she'd said, avoiding mention of the note to keep him from dismissing her as fanciful. "Could you meet me there at 11:30? Just a precaution." Craddock, accustomed to her uncanny instincts, agreed without hesitation, promising to bring a torch and his service revolver. Now, bundled in her warmest shawl and a sturdy coat, Miss Marple slipped the brooch into her handbag, grabbed her walking stick, and stepped into the chilly night. The path to the mill wound through meadows and past the river, its waters gurgling softly under the moonlight. The mill itself was a relic of St. Mary Mead's past, its wooden wheel long stilled, its stone walls cloaked in moss and memories. Village children spun tales of ghosts haunting its rafters, but Miss Marple suspected the only spectres tonight would be human. As she approached, the silhouette of the mill loomed against the starry sky, its broken windows like dark, unblinking eyes. Craddock was already there, leaning against a tree, his torch beam cutting through the darkness. "Miss Marple," he whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. "This better be worth the midnight trek." She gave him a small, knowing smile. "Patience, Inspector. The truth often keeps late hours." They positioned themselves behind a crumbling wall near the mill's entrance, where shadows offered cover, and waited, the silence broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. As midnight neared, the crunch of footsteps on gravel sent a shiver down Miss Marple's spine. A figure emerged from the mist, a woman, tall and elegant, her face partially hidden by a scarf wrapped loosely around her head. She carried a small lantern, its faint light illuminating a coat too fine for village wear, its fabric shimmering with city sophistication. The woman paused at the mill's door, glancing nervously over her shoulder before slipping inside. Miss Marple's heart raced. This could be the woman Mrs. Price had seen at the churchyard, the one placing lilies on Sir Reginald's grave. She nudged Craddock, who nodded, his hand resting lightly on his revolver. They crept closer, careful to avoid the loose stones littering the path. Inside the mill, the air was damp and heavy, smelling of rotting wood and river water. The woman's lantern cast eerie shadows on the walls, where old machinery rusted in neglect. She knelt near a pile of debris in the corner, her hands sifting through broken planks, as if searching for something hidden. Miss Marple's sharp eyes caught a glint of metal, a small, rusted box half buried under the rubble. The woman pried it open, revealing a bundle of papers tied with string. Her movements were hurried, almost frantic, as she scanned the documents, muttering under her breath. Miss Marple strained to hear, catching fragments. "The crest! It's here somewhere!" Suddenly, a second set of footsteps echoed from the mill's upper level, heavy and deliberate. The woman froze, her lantern trembling in her grip. A man's voice, low and gravelly, called out, "You're late, Clara. Did you bring it?" Miss Marple's mind whirred. Clara? The name didn't match the elusive E, but it was a piece of the puzzle. Craddock signalled for silence, his torch now off to avoid detection. The man descended the creaking stairs, his figure tall and broad, cloaked in the same dark coat Miss Marple had glimpsed in the village. His face remained shadowed, but his tone was sharp, laced with menace. "The brooch, Clara. Where is it?" Clara stood, clutching the papers to her chest. "I don't have it, Victor. I told you it was sent away. But these papers, they confirm everything. The vault, the fortune, it's all real." Her voice quavered, betraying fear. Victor stepped closer, his silhouette towering over her. "You're lying. You've been playing both sides, haven't you? Just like Edmund did." The mention of Edmund Harrington sent a jolt through Miss Marple. She leaned forward, her grip tightening on her walking stick. Before Clara could respond, a loud crack split the air. A loose beam in the mill's ceiling gave way, crashing to the floor between the two. Clara screamed, dropping her lantern, which shattered and plunged the mill into darkness. Victor cursed, his footsteps retreating as he bolted for the door. Craddock sprang into action, shouting, "Police, stop!" But the man was fast, vanishing into the night before Craddock could reach him. Miss Marple hurried to Clara, who was trembling amid the debris, the papers scattered at her feet. "My dear, are you hurt?" Miss Marple asked, her voice soothing but firm. Clara, pale and wide-eyed, shook her head. I didn't know he'd be here," she stammered. Craddock returned, frustrated but unharmed, and helped Clara to her feet. Under the beam of his torch, Miss Marple gathered the papers, old letters, a map of the Harrington Manor, and a sketch of the Brooch's crest with annotations in a spidery hand. Clara, regaining her composure, introduced herself as Clara Wentworth, a London antiques dealer who'd been contacted by someone claiming to be Edmund Harrington's heir. "He said the brooch was mine by right," she explained, her voice unsteady. "But he needed my help to find the vault. I didn't trust him, so I came to investigate alone." Miss Marple noted the scarf, silk, expensive, matching Mrs. Price's description of the woman at the grave. Was Clara telling the full truth? Craddock insisted on escorting Clara to the village inn for safety. But Miss Marple lingered a moment, her eyes scanning the mill's dark corners. The rusted box Clara had opened was empty now, but its lock bore faint scratches, as if recently tampered with. She tucked the papers into her handbag, alongside the brooch, and joined Craddock and Clara outside. The night air was colder now, the mist thicker, and Miss Marple felt the weight of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. Clara's story raised more questions than answers. Who was Victor, and how did he know about the brooch? Was Clara a victim or a player in this dangerous game? And what did those papers reveal about the manor's vault? As they walked back to the village, Miss Marple's mind pieced together the fragments. Edmund's name, the crest, the vault. She'd need to study the papers closely, perhaps with Miss Hartnell's help. For now, the mill had given up one secret, but others waited, lurking like ghosts in the Harringtons' past. The story continues in Chapter 5, where the papers unveil a hidden truth. Chapter 5. The Papers' Hidden Truth. The morning after the tense encounter at the old mill, Miss Marple sat at her kitchen table, the crimson brooch glinting beside a steaming teapot, and the scattered papers Clara had dropped in her panic. The cottage was quiet, save for the soft patter of rain against the windows, a fitting backdrop for the task at hand. Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles, her fingers tracing the edges of the old letters and the map of Harrington Manor she'd retrieved from the mill. The sketch of the brooch's crest, with its lion and lotus, was annotated with cryptic phrases. "Turn at the third, beneath the flame," written in a hand that trembled with urgency. She sensed these papers held the key to the manor's vault, but decoding them would require patience and a keen eye for detail. The memory of Clara's fear and the mysterious Victor's threatening voice lingered, urging her to work quickly. Someone else was hunting for the brooch's secrets, and they weren't far behind. The first letter, brittle and stained with age, was addressed to My Dearest E, and signed by Sir Reginald himself, dated just weeks before his death in 1925. Its tone was tender, almost desperate, apologizing for the burden of my choices and promising to secure our legacy in a place only she could find. Miss Marple's brow furrowed. Was E the dancer Miss Hartnell had mentioned, or someone closer to Sir Reginald's heart? The letter mentioned a gift from Calcutta, clearly the brooch, and hinted at a hiding place where the lion guards the flame. She recalled the manor's library fireplace, crowned with the crest in Sir Reginald's portrait. Could the vault be there, concealed by a mechanism tied to the brooch? The map, hand-drawn on faded parchment, showed the manor's layout with a faint X marked behind the library's west wall. Her pulse quickened. This was no mere rumour. The vault was real, and the papers were a guide. The second document was a legal notice, dated 1926, declaring Edmund Harrington missing and presumed dead after failing to claim his inheritance. Scribbled in the margin, in the same shaky hand as the sketch, were the words, "He knew too much." Miss Marple paused, her tea untouched. Edmund's disappearance had always been a village mystery, but this suggested foul play, perhaps tied to the brooch or the fortune it protected. The final paper was a ledger page, listing jewels acquired during Sir Reginald's time in India, including the brooch, valued at an astonishing sum equivalent to thousands of pounds even now. A note beside it read, "For E, in trust, until the truth is safe." The pieces were aligning. The brooch wasn't just a jewel, but a key to a fortune, guarded by secrets someone was desperate to uncover or bury. Determined to verify her findings, Miss Marple visited Miss Hartnell again, bringing the papers for her expert eye. The historian's parlour was as cluttered as ever, shelves groaning under the weight of village records. Miss Hartnell pored over the documents, her excitement palpable. "This letter confirms it, Jane," she said, pointing to Sir Reginald's signature. He was besotted with someone, not his wife. The dancer, perhaps, or a secret love we never knew. And this map, it's precise. The library's west wall had a false panel, installed during renovations in the 1920s. I'd bet my best fountain pen the vault's behind it. She hesitated, then added, "But be careful. If Edmund was silenced, whoever's after this now won't hesitate to do the same." Miss Marple nodded, her mind already racing to the manor. She needed to see that fireplace for herself. Before leaving, Miss Hartnell mentioned a rumour from her archives. A woman matching Clara's description had been seen in St. Mary Mead months earlier, inquiring about the Harrington estate at the local pub. She called herself an antiques dealer, but her questions were too specific, Miss Hartnell said, narrowing her eyes. Miss Marple thanked her and headed to the village inn to speak with Clara, who'd stayed there under Craddock's watch. The inn was bustling with midday chatter, but Clara sat alone in a corner, her silk scarf draped over a chair, her face pale and drawn. When Miss Marple approached, Clara's eyes darted nervously. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said, twisting her hands. "Victor, he's a collector, ruthless. He thinks the brooch is his. Says it was promised to his family. I only wanted to find the truth about my grandmother." Miss Marple's ears pricked up. "Your grandmother?" Clara nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "She was the dancer Elise, Sir Reginald's love. I'm named after her, Clara Elise Wentworth." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Clara was E's granddaughter, possibly the heir to the brooch's legacy. But her story raised doubts. Why had she kept this secret? And was Victor, the man in the dark coat, or merely a pawn in a larger scheme? Miss Marple pressed gently, learning that Clara had received the brooch from an anonymous sender, along with a letter urging her to find the vault before they did. Clara swore she didn't know Victor's full identity, only that he'd tracked her from London, demanding the brooch. Miss Marple advised her to stay at the inn and avoid contact with strangers, then left, her mind buzzing with new connections. Clara's story was plausible, but her nervous glances suggested she wasn't telling everything. As evening fell, Miss Marple returned to her cottage, spreading the papers across her table. The map's X haunted her, as did Sir Reginald's letter to E. She sketched the fireplace from memory, noting the crest above it. The brooch's engravings might fit a lock, but she'd need to visit the manor to test her theory. Craddock, informed of her plans, insisted on joining her, wary of another break-in. As she prepared for bed, a soft thud outside her window made her freeze. Peering through the curtains, she saw nothing but shadows dancing in the rain-soaked garden. Yet the air felt heavy, as if the village itself held its breath. The brooch, the vault, Clara's grandmother. The threads were weaving together, but danger was closing in. Tomorrow the manor's library would reveal its secrets, or its traps. The story continues in Chapter 6, where the fireplace yields a startling discovery. Chapter 6. The fireplace's secret. The dawn broke grey and damp over St. Mary Mead, the village shrouded in a mist that clung to the hedgerows like a veil. Miss Marple, undeterred by the previous night's unsettling thud outside her cottage, rose early, her mind fixed on the Harrington Manor's library fireplace. The papers from the mill, especially the map with its telltale X and Sir Reginald's letter hinting at a hiding place where the lion guards the flame, pointed to a vault concealed behind the fireplace. The crimson brooch, still nestled in its velvet pouch, felt like a talisman as she slipped it into her handbag. She telephoned Inspector Craddock, arranging to meet him at the manor by mid-morning. "Bring a crowbar, Inspector," she said lightly, though her tone carried the weight of anticipation. "We may need to pry open the past." Craddock, sensing her resolve, agreed without question, his trust in her instincts unwavering. The manor's gates creaked as Miss Marple and Craddock approached, the caretaker, Mr. Gibbs, eyeing them warily from the doorstep. "Back again, Miss Marple?" he muttered, but he let them in, grumbling about the mess from the recent break-in. The library was as they'd left it, a chaos of scattered books and dust motes swirling in the slanted light. The fireplace dominated the west wall, its marble surround carved with intricate vines, and above it hung Sir Reginald's portrait, the lion and lotus crest on his cane staring down like a sentinel. Miss Marple studied the crest, then the brooch, noting how its engravings mirrored the portrait's design. "Inspector," she said, pointing to the fireplace, "I believe there's a mechanism here. The papers mentioned beneath the flame. Let's start with the hearth." Craddock, practical and methodical, knelt to examine the stone base, his fingers probing for anything unusual. After a moment he paused, feeling a slight give under one of the tiles. "There's something here," he said, his voice taut with excitement. With the crowbar, Craddock carefully pried up the tile, revealing a small, rusted metal plate embedded in the stone. It bore a shallow indentation shaped like the brooch's crest, a perfect fit for the lion and lotus. Miss Marple handed him the brooch, her hand steady despite the thrill coursing through her. As Craddock pressed it into the slot, a low grinding sound echoed through the library, like gears long dormant stirring to life. The fireplace's back panel shifted, sliding to one side with a groan, exposing a narrow, dark passage. Dust billowed out, and Miss Marple coughed, waving it away with her handkerchief. Craddock shone his torch into the void, illuminating a stone staircase descending into shadow. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. "You were right, Miss Marple. A vault." She nodded, her eyes gleaming. "Shall we, Inspector?" Gibbs, hovering nearby, looked pale, muttering about curses, but Miss Marple ignored him, her curiosity outweighing any superstition. The staircase was steep, its steps slick with damp. Craddock led the way, his torch casting long shadows that danced on the rough-hewn walls. At the bottom they found a small chamber, its air thick with the scent of earth and age. A heavy iron door stood before them, its surface etched with the same crest, though this time with a keyhole at its centre. Miss Marple examined the brooch again, but its shape didn't match the lock. The brooch opened the passage, she mused aloud. But it seems we need another key for the vault itself. Craddock swept his torch around, revealing a stone ledge along one wall. On it lay a single object, a tarnished silver locket engraved with the initials E.W. Miss Marple's heart skipped. Elise Wentworth, Clara's grandmother, the dancer tied to Sir Reginald's heart. She opened the locket, revealing a faded photograph of a young woman with striking eyes, her smile radiant, yet tinged with sadness. Tucked inside was a tiny folded note. The key lies with the third lion. Trust no one. The word sent a chill through Miss Marple. The third lion echoed the cryptic annotation on the mill papers. Turn at the third. She scanned the chamber, noticing 3 small lion carvings on the walls, each holding a different object in its paws. A rose, a book, and a flame. The third lion, clutching the flame, had a faint seam around its base. Craddock, following her gaze, pressed the carving, and a click sounded. A small compartment opened in the wall, revealing a brass key, its handle shaped like a lotus flower. That's it, Craddock said, retrieving the key. He inserted it into the vault's lock, and with a heavy clunk, the door swung open. Inside was a metal chest, its surface pitted with rust but intact. Craddock lifted the lid, revealing a trove of jewels, emeralds, sapphires and diamonds, alongside a leather-bound journal. Miss Marple's fingers brushed the journal's cover, her mind racing. This was Sir Reginald's fortune, hidden all these years, but the journal promised the real treasure, the truth. As they emerged from the vault, journal and locket in hand, Gibbs appeared at the passage entrance, his scowl replaced by a nervous twitch. "You shouldn't be meddling with that, miss," he said, his voice sharp. "The Harringtons' secrets are best left buried." Miss Marple met his gaze, noting the sweat on his brow despite the cool air. Had he known about the vault all along? Before she could press him, a distant crash echoed from the manor's upper floor, glass shattering, followed by hurried footsteps. Craddock bolted up the stairs, revolver drawn, but returned moments later, frustrated. "Gone," he said. "Another window broken. Whoever it was, they're watching us." Miss Marple clutched the journal tightly, its weight a reminder of the danger now circling closer. The locket's note, "Trust no one," rang in her ears. Was Gibbs involved, or was he merely afraid? And who was the figure fleeing the manor? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple spread the journal's pages under her lamp. Its entries, written in Sir Reginald's precise hand, detailed his love for Elise Wentworth and his fear of betrayal by those closest to him. One passage stood out. "Edmund knows the truth about the brooch. If he speaks, all is lost." The words confirmed her suspicions. Edmund's disappearance was no accident. As she closed the journal, a shadow flickered past her window, too quick to identify. The village was alive with secrets, and the vault's discovery had stirred them into motion. Tomorrow, she'd confront Clara about the locket and press Gibbs for answers. For now, the brooch and journal sat on her table, silent witnesses to a mystery growing darker by the hour. The story continues in Chapter 7, where the journal's revelations draw a dangerous visitor to St. Mary Mead. Chapter 7, The Dangerous Visitor. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving St. Mary Mead glistening under a pale sun. But Miss Marple felt no warmth as she sat in her cottage. The leather-bound journal from the Harrington Manor vault opened before her, its pages filled with Sir Reginald's confessions of love for Elise Wentworth and his fears of betrayal, painted a picture of a man haunted by his own secrets. The crimson brooch, still in its velvet pouch, seemed to pulse with the weight of those truths, and the silver locket with Elise's photograph lay beside it. Its warning, "Trust no one," etched in Miss Marple's mind. The journal's final entry, dated the night of Sir Reginald's death, was chilling. "They know about the brooch. Edmund is in danger. If I fall, the vault must stay sealed. Miss Marple's fingers trembled slightly as she closed the journal. Someone had silenced Sir Reginald, and now, decades later, the same shadow seemed to stalk the village. The crash at the manor the previous day was no coincidence. Someone was desperate to stop her from unravelling the truth. Determined to confront Clara about the locket, Miss Marple set out for the village inn, the journal tucked securely in her handbag. The inn's dining room was quiet, its tables adorned with crisp white cloths, but Clara was nowhere to be seen. The innkeeper, Mrs. Baxter, a stout woman with a penchant for gossip, leaned over the counter. Miss Wentworth left early, Miss Marple. Said she had urgent business in London. Looked proper shaken, if you ask me. Miss Marple's heart sank. Clara's sudden departure felt like flight, guilt or fear, she couldn't yet tell. Thanking Mrs. Baxter, she stepped outside, her eyes scanning the village square. A black car, its windows tinted, idled near the post office before speeding off toward the main road. The sight prickled her instincts. Clara had mentioned no car, and Victor, the man from the mill, remained a faceless threat. Next, Miss Marple headed to the manor to question Mr. Gibbs, the caretaker, whose nervous demeanour in the library had raised her suspicions. The manor's grounds were silent, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. Gibbs was raking leaves near the gate, his movements slow and deliberate. When he saw her, his face tightened. "Back again, miss? You're stirring up trouble with that vault business." Miss Marple smiled calmly, her voice gentle but probing. "Mr. Gibbs, you've been here for years. Did you ever see a woman named Elise Wentworth, or perhaps a man called Victor?" Gibbs's rake paused mid-swipe, his knuckles whitening. "Don't know no Victor," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "As for Elise, old stories say she was trouble. Left the village after Sir Reginald's death. Best let it lie." His evasiveness was telling, but before she could press further, a sharp crack rang out from the manor's gardens, a twig snapping underfoot, too deliberate for a stray animal. Miss Marple turned, catching a glimpse of a tall figure in a dark coat slipping behind a yew hedge. Her pulse quickened. "Mr. Gibbs, stay here," she said, moving swiftly toward the hedge, her walking stick tapping the ground. Gibbs hesitated, then followed, muttering about trespassers. Beyond the hedge, a narrow path led to the manor's overgrown rose garden, where the figure had vanished. Miss Marple's sharp eyes spotted a cigarette butt, still smouldering on the ground. It bore a faint monogram, V. Victor. She pocketed it, her mind racing. Gibbs, now at her side, looked genuinely alarmed. "I told you, miss, this place ain't safe no more. Ever since you opened that vault, folks been poking around." His words confirmed her fears. The vault's discovery had drawn a dangerous visitor to St. Mary Mead. Returning to her cottage, Miss Marple decided to call Inspector Craddock, but before she could reach the telephone, a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find a stranger, a man in his 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and piercing grey eyes. His dark coat matched the one she'd seen, and his smile was polite but cold. "Miss Marple, I'm Victor Langston, a historian researching the Harrington family. I hear you've come across some interesting items." His voice was smooth, but the mention of his name sent a chill through her. This was the man from the mill, the one Clara feared. Miss Marple invited him in, her instincts on high alert. Over tea, Victor claimed to be tracing a lost family heirloom, the crimson brooch, stolen from his ancestors during Sir Reginald's time in India. "It rightfully belongs to my family," he said, his eyes flicking to her handbag. "I'd pay handsomely to have it returned." His offer was tempting, but his gaze was too sharp, his story too rehearsed. Miss Marple deflected, feigning ignorance. "A brooch, you say? I'm afraid I'm just an old woman with a fondness for knitting." Victor's smile tightened, and he stood to leave, but not before dropping a veiled warning. "Secrets have a way of surfacing, Miss Marple. Be careful what you dig up." As he left, she noticed his boots, caked with mud matching the manor's garden soil. Alone again, she locked the door, her mind piecing together the encounter. Victor's claim to the brooch contradicted Clara's story of her grandmother's inheritance. Was he a descendant of the Harringtons' rivals, or something more sinister? The journal's warning about Edmund's danger echoed in her thoughts. She opened it again, finding a passage she'd overlooked. Elise swore to protect the brooch, but V will stop at nothing to claim it. Victor. As dusk settled over the village, Miss Marple sat by her fire, the brooch and locket before her. Victor's visit was no coincidence. He was closing in, and Clara's flight to London suggested she knew more than she'd shared. The cigarette butt, the journal, the vault's treasures, all pointed to a conspiracy rooted in Sir Reginald's death. Miss Marple resolved to track Clara down, perhaps through Mrs. Baxter's contacts at the inn. But for now, she'd keep the brooch hidden and the journal close. The village was no longer a haven, it was a battlefield, and Victor Langston was a formidable opponent. The story continues in Chapter 8, where a journey to London uncovers Clara's true motives. Chapter 8. London's Tangled Threads. The early morning train to London rattled through the misty countryside, its rhythm a steady counterpoint to Miss Marple's racing thoughts. She sat by the window, her handbag resting on her lap, the crimson brooch and Sir Reginald's journal safely tucked inside. Victor Langston's chilling visit the previous day had convinced her that Clara's sudden departure to London held the key to unravelling the mystery. The antiques dealer's claim of being Elise Wentworth's granddaughter was plausible, but her flight from St. Mary Mead suggested she was either running from danger or hiding something crucial. Miss Marple had persuaded Inspector Craddock to stay in the village to monitor Victor's movements, while she, with her unassuming air and knack for blending into crowds, pursued Clara. Mrs. Baxter at the inn had overheard Clara mention a meeting at a London antiques shop, Wentworth and Sons, which Miss Marple now intended to find. As the train pulled into Paddington Station, the city's bustle enveloped her, a stark contrast to the quiet lanes of St. Mary Mead. Navigating London's crowded streets, Miss Marple made her way to Wentworth and Sons, a narrow shop tucked between a bookbinder and a tea merchant in Bloomsbury. Its windows displayed an array of artifacts, porcelain vases, gilded clocks, and jewellery that whispered of forgotten eras. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and old leather. A young clerk, polishing a silver candlestick, looked up as she entered. "Miss Wentworth?" "She's in the back, but she's not taking visitors," he said, his tone curt. Miss Marple's gentle smile and mention of an urgent matter from St. Mary Mead softened his resistance, and he disappeared to fetch Clara. Moments later, Clara emerged, her silk scarf loosely draped, her face pale but composed. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice tight, "you shouldn't have come. It's not safe." Her eyes darted to the shop's door, as if expecting someone to burst through. Over a pot of tea in the shop's cluttered office, Clara's story unravelled. She admitted to receiving the brooch from an anonymous sender, along with a letter claiming it was her grandmother Elise's, stolen after Sir Reginald's death. The letter urged her to find the Harrington vault, promising it held proof of Elise's claim to the family fortune. "I thought I could handle it alone," Clara said, twisting a ring on her finger. "But Victor found me. He says his family was cheated out of the brooch in India, and he'll do anything to get it back." Miss Marple listened, noting Clara's nervous glances toward a locked cabinet in the corner. Was she hiding something there? Gently, Miss Marple produced the locket from the manor vault, its silver surface gleaming. Clara gasped, reaching for it. "That was my grandmother's." "Where did you find it?" Miss Marple explained the vault's discovery, watching Clara's reaction closely. Her shock seemed genuine, but her fingers trembled as she opened the locket, revealing Elise's photograph. "She loved Sir Reginald," Clara whispered, "but someone betrayed them both." Miss Marple pressed further, asking about the papers from the mill and the mention of V. Clara's face darkened. "Victor Langston. He's no historian. He's a descendant of Sir Reginald's business partner in India, a man named Vincent Langston, who swore revenge after a deal went sour. Victor thinks the brooch and vault belong to him. She hesitated, then added, "There's more. My grandmother left a diary hidden here in the shop. It mentions a second key, not the brooch, but something smaller, lost in the village." Miss Marple's mind flashed to the manor's vault door, which had required a separate brass key. Could it still be in St. Mary Mead, perhaps overlooked in the mill or manor? Before she could ask more, a loud knock echoed from the shop's front door. The clerk's voice called out, "Miss Wentworth, it's that Langston fellow again." Clara froze, her eyes wide with fear. Miss Marple acted quickly, urging Clara to hide in the back room while she faced Victor. Adjusting her shawl, she stepped into the shop's main area, where Victor Langston stood, his dark coat damp from the London drizzle, his grey eyes cold as steel. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice smooth but edged with menace, "you're far from home. Hand over the brooch, and we'll avoid trouble." Miss Marple feigned confusion, clutching her handbag tightly. "I'm just here to browse antiques, Mr. Langston. Perhaps you're mistaken." His smile was thin, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Don't play games, old woman. I know you've been to the vault. Clara's not as clever as she thinks, and neither are you." The clerk, sensing tension, hovered nervously, but Miss Marple remained calm, her mind racing. She mentioned a fictional appointment with a Scotland Yard friend, hoping to deter him. Victor's jaw tightened, but he backed off, muttering, "This isn't over," before storming out into the street. Clara emerged, shaken but resolute. She handed Miss Marple a small, locked diary, its cover embossed with Elise's initials. "This was my grandmother's. It might explain the second key. Take it back to St. Mary Mead. I can't keep it safe here." Miss Marple accepted the diary, its weight adding to the burden of secrets in her handbag. As she left the shop, the city's noise felt oppressive, and she sensed eyes watching her from the crowd. The train ride home was a blur, her thoughts consumed by Elise's diary and the second key. Victor's pursuit was relentless, and Clara's fear suggested she was still withholding something. Back in her cottage, Miss Marple would need to decipher the diary's contents and revisit the manor, perhaps with Craddock's help, to find the missing key. The village was a powder keg, and Victor Langston was holding a match. The story continues in Chapter 9, where Elise's diary reveals a shocking betrayal. Chapter 9. The diary's betrayal. The familiar glow of her cottage lamp welcomed Miss Marple as she settled into her armchair, the weight of London's revelations still heavy on her mind. The crimson brooch, Sir Reginald's journal, and now Elise Wentworth's diary lay before her, each a piece of a puzzle that grew more perilous with every step. The diary, its leather cover worn but intact, was locked with a tiny clasp, and Miss Marple, ever resourceful, used a hairpin to coax it open. The pages smelled of lavender and thyme, filled with Elise's elegant script, a testament to a life caught between love and danger. As the village clock struck 9, its chimes drifting through the night, Miss Marple began to read. Her heart braced for the truths hidden within. The diary promised answers about the second key, and perhaps the betrayal that had cost Sir Reginald his life and sent Edmund Harrington into oblivion. Elise's entries began in 1923, detailing her arrival in St. Mary Mead as a dancer hired to perform at a Harrington Manor gala. Her words painted a vivid picture. Sir Reginald, charmed by her grace, gifted her the crimson brooch as a token of his affection, despite his marriage to Lady Harrington. But the entries darkened, describing whispered threats from Vincent Langston, Sir Reginald's business partner from India, who claimed the brooch was stolen from his family's estate during the Raj. "Vincent swore to ruin us," Elise wrote. "He knows the brooch is more than a jewel. It's the key to Reginald's fortune, hidden in the manor." Miss Marple's fingers paused on the page. The brooch's role as a vault key was clear, but Elise's next words sent a chill through her. Edmund overheard Vincent plotting with someone in the village. A woman, I fear she's closer to Reginald than I. A woman? Lady Harrington or another? The diary revealed a secret meeting at the old mill in 1925, where Elise hid a second key, a small lotus-shaped pin, to protect the vault from Vincent's grasp. I buried it beneath the mill's floorboards, under the west window, she wrote. If Reginald falls, the pin must stay lost. Miss Marple's mind flashed to the mill where Clara had been searching. Had she known about the pin, or was she after something else? The final entry, dated the day of Sir Reginald's death, was frantic. Vincent confronted me at the manor. He says Reginald's poison was no suicide. Someone betrayed us. I must flee, but Edmund knows too much. God help him. The diary ended abruptly, leaving Miss Marple with a sinking feeling. Vincent Langston's shadow loomed large, and his descendant, Victor, was carrying on the vendetta. Determined to find the lotus-shaped pin, Miss Marple telephoned Inspector Craddock, arranging to meet him at the mill at dawn. She kept Victor's threatening visit in London to herself, not wanting to alarm Craddock until she had more proof. Sleep eluded her that night, the diary's words echoing in her mind. The betrayal Elise hinted at pointed to someone in St. Mary Mead, a woman close to Sir Reginald, perhaps even Lady Harrington, whose absence after his death now seemed suspicious. As the first light of dawn crept through her curtains, Miss Marple dressed warmly, tucking the diary into her handbag alongside the brooch. The mill, with its crumbling walls and haunted reputation, awaited. Craddock was already at the mill when she arrived, his torch sweeping the damp interior. "Another hunch, Miss Marple?" he asked, a wry smile softening his serious demeanour. She nodded, directing him to the west window, its frame warped by years of neglect. Together they pried up the floorboards, revealing a layer of dirt and debris. Miss Marple knelt, her fingers sifting through the earth until they brushed against something hard, a small metal pin, its lotus design matching the vault's key. "This is it," she whispered, holding it up to the light. Craddock's eyes widened. "You're a marvel, Miss Marple. But what does it open?" Before she could answer, a shadow moved outside the window. A figure, fleeting but unmistakable, in a dark coat. Victor Craddock bolted outside, but the figure was gone, leaving only a fresh footprint in the mud. Miss Marple clutched the pin, her mind racing. Victor's persistence suggested he knew about the second key, but how? Had Clara betrayed her, or was someone else feeding him information? Back at the cottage, Miss Marple examined the pin, its delicate craftsmanship a perfect companion to the brooch. The diary's mention of a village woman gnawed at her. She recalled Mrs. Baxter's gossip at the inn, hinting at Lady Harrington's bitterness toward Elise. Could Lady Harrington, long vanished, still be alive, orchestrating events from the shadows? Or was Mr. Gibbs, the nervous caretaker, more involved than he let on? As evening fell, Miss Marple decided to revisit the manor with Craddock to test the pin in the vault's lock. But a sharp knock at her door interrupted her plans. Opening it, she found Mrs. Price, the vicar's wife, her face flushed with urgency. "Miss Marple, I saw that man, Victor, at the churchyard again, near Sir Reginald's grave. He was digging, and he looked furious when I called out." Miss Marple's heart raced. Victor was closing in, and the pin in her hand felt like a ticking bomb. The village's secrets were unraveling, but the cost of truth was growing steeper. The story continues in Chapter 10, where the final confrontation reveals the heart of the Crimson Brooch's curse. Chapter 10. The curse unveiled. The twilight sky over St. Mary Mead was streaked with crimson as Miss Marple and Inspector Craddock approached the Harrington Manor, the lotus-shaped pin and crimson brooch secure in her handbag. The diary's revelations, Victor's relentless pursuit, and Mrs. Price's report of him digging at Sir Reginald's grave had set Miss Marple's nerves on edge. The manor loomed ahead, its shadowed walls a silent witness to decades of secrets. The lotus pin, hidden for years beneath the mill's floorboards, was the final key to the vault's inner lock, and Miss Marple knew tonight would bring the truth, or danger, to light. Craddock, his revolver at the ready, scanned the grounds for signs of Victor Langston. "This ends now, Miss Marple," he said, his voice firm. She nodded, her sharp mind piecing together the final threads of the puzzle. Elise's betrayal, Edmund's fate, and the woman in the village who had orchestrated it all. Inside the manor's library, the fireplace stood as they'd left it, the hidden passage still open from their previous visit. The air was thick with dust in anticipation as they descended the stone staircase to the vault. Miss Marple's fingers trembled slightly as she inserted the lotus pin into the inner lock of the metal chest they'd found days before. With a soft click, the lid sprang open, revealing not just the jewels they'd seen, but a sealed envelope, yellowed with age, addressed to Elise, at my heart. Craddock shone his torch as Miss Marple opened it, her eyes scanning the single page inside. It was Sir Reginald's final confession, written hours before his death. "Vincent Langston poisoned me, but he was not alone. My wife Margaret betrayed me, jealous of you. She gave him the poison, believing it would secure the fortune for Edmund. But Edmund knows, and Vincent will silence him. The brooch and pin are yours, Elise. Guard them, for they unlock the truth." Miss Marple's breath caught. Lady Margaret Harrington, not a victim, but a conspirator, had orchestrated the murder with Vincent Langston, Victor's ancestor. As they processed the revelation, a creak echoed from the passage above. Craddock drew his revolver, motioning for Miss Marple to stay back. Footsteps descended, deliberate and heavy, and Victor Langston emerged, his dark coat blending with the shadows, a pistol glinting in his hand. "You've gone too far, Miss Marple," he snarled. "That fortune belongs to my family. Vincent was cheated, and I'll have what's mine." Before Craddock could act, another figure appeared behind Victor. Clara Wentworth, her face pale but resolute, holding a small knife. "Drop the gun, Victor," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Miss Marple's mind raced. Clara's presence wasn't a surprise. She'd suspected the antiques dealer had returned to St. Mary Mead, driven by her grandmother's legacy, but her courage now suggested loyalty to Elise's memory. Victor laughed, cold and bitter. "You're no match for me, Clara. Your grandmother was a thief, and you're no better." Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice calm but piercing. "You're wrong, Mr. Langston. The brooch was Elise's, given by Sir Reginald. Your ancestor Vincent killed him, with help from Lady Harrington, and you've been chasing a lie." She held up the confession, its words damning in the torchlight. Victor's eyes narrowed, but before he could lunge, a third figure emerged from the shadows. Mr. Gibbs, the caretaker, his face ashen. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "I can't keep quiet no more. I saw it all back then. Lady Harrington and Vincent plotting in the manor. I was just a lad, hired to clean the stables, but I heard them. They killed Edmund too, buried him in the churchyard, unmarked." The room froze. Miss Marple's heart sank as the final piece fell into place. Gibbs, tormented by guilt, had been the one placing lilies at Sir Reginald's grave, mourning not just the patriarch, but Edmund, whose death he'd concealed for decades. Victor's face twisted with rage. "You're lying," he roared, raising his pistol. But Craddock was faster, tackling him to the ground, the gun skittering across the floor. Clara dropped her knife, tears streaming down her face. "My grandmother knew," she whispered. "She fled to protect me, her unborn child's future. That's why she hid the pin." Miss Marple nodded, her voice gentle. "And you sent me the brooch, didn't you, Clara? To uncover the truth." Clara nodded, her shoulders sagging. "I found it in her shop after she died. I wanted justice." Craddock handcuffed Victor, who spat curses as he was led away. Gibbs, trembling, confessed to helping Lady Harrington cover up Edmund's murder, fearing for his life if he spoke out. Lady Harrington, long vanished, had died in London years ago, her role in the betrayal buried until now. Miss Marple handed the confession and jewels to Craddock, ensuring they'd be catalogued as evidence. The brooch and pin, however, she gave to Clara. "They're yours, my dear," she said. Your grandmother's legacy, not a curse, but a symbol of her love. Clara clutched them, her eyes filled with gratitude. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, the village quiet once more. The Crimson Brooch's curse was no supernatural force, but the greed and jealousy that had torn the Harringtons apart. Vincent Langston and Lady Harrington's betrayal had claimed Sir Reginald and Edmund, but Elise's courage, through Clara, had brought the truth to light. As the clock chimed midnight, Miss Marple smiled softly, her knitting needles clicking. The puzzle was solved, St. Mary Mead safe again, for now. She turned to you, dear viewer, with a final thought. If you've enjoyed this tale of mystery and deduction, please like and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us. The story ends here, but who knows what secrets the village will whisper next.